Hey everyone, I'm Martin and I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking. Welcome back to the unit. This is not a 10k Ferrari challenge video. It's actually a video about the latest acquisition, which I'm equal measures happy and mortified about. It's one of the ugliest cars ever made, but I've bought it for a reason and you'll find out soon enough what that reason is. For now though, it's only me at the unit. So this is going to be another one of those wonderfully, marvelously edited, shot, brilliant dynamic videos where it's me and the camera. No Blair, because as I say, he's the busiest videographer in the land. Bloody flies everywhere. He's the busiest videographer in the land, and if I want him to come and film with me, I've got to book in 3 or 4 months in advance. But that's the price you pay with extra quality. As I say, today, it's me, it's you, it's the car. Let's get into the history of how the Cayenne saved Porsche. Horrifying to think though, isn't it, that the manufacturer that brought us the 959, the 911, the 911, 911, 912, 356, so many wonderful models in between, was at the point of the early 90s on the brink of financial collapse. The cocaine-fueled days of the 1980s, where city traders would rack up a line in the morning, no drugs, kids. Fire to the office, broker a couple of deals, have a wild success, have some more cocaine, and then powered by the powder, they'd go to the Porsche dealership and buy a 911 for lunch. In reality though, you dive into a Porsche dealership in 1991 and you'd be greeted by a 911, a 911, different kind of 911, perhaps an aging, outgoing 928 and a 944 over there, and that was really it. So Porsche knew they needed a model that would take them global, open up a whole load of new markets, and ultimately save them from going bust. With only 23,060, see, I made it look like I was trying to remember, but I actually read it just minutes ago. 23,060 cars were sold by Porsche in the financial year 91 to 92, and that was it. Around the world, globally, their entire product range yielded only 23,000 sales. And that's madness. No wonder the heads at Stuttgart were sweating. I did promise myself I wouldn't do a German accent, and there I was, saying sweating instead of sweating. Thanks, mate. So, on the brink of absolute financial ruination, this incredible marque here that we've all known and loved forever, with its racing heritage, with its incredible true drivers' cars, it was about to go bust. So what could they do? 1996 saw the eventual launch of this, the 986 Boxster, and whilst it was a beautiful thing, it looked like a 911 from the front, and at the back it didn't. It was derisively known as the poor man's Porsche. Bloody flies again. Have you seen the cost of Boxsters these days? Bloody 100 grand, man. Anyway, at the time it was the Porsche you bought if you couldn't afford a 911. Which is what people said, but it drove fantastically. It was adored everywhere. The motoring press thought it was superb. You could get the top down, but you couldn't in a 911 Cabriolet. Anyway, it was loved, and it was great, but it was never going to be the volume car that Porsche needed to pull them from the trenches. So unfortunately, it was zurück zum Zeichenbrett. Back to the drawing board for the Wigzett Weissach. Oh look, another shot, another wonderful angle of this dynamically edited video. Sorry Blair mate, don't need you anymore until I try and edit this, which I'll fail at. But Ferry Porsche predicted back in 1989, if we built an off-roader with our quality and popped a Porsche crest on the bonnet, people will buy it. And for the last 20 years at least, he's been proven right year on year. Now, Porsche dealerships in the late 90s were ever so slightly different to how they were in the early 90s. The now 996 911 was selling very, very well. And of course, there was the Boxster now in the little lineup. They were sold with a very 20th century narrative of his and hers. 911 for the husband, shove the wife in a Boxster, she'll like that. And draconian as that is, the model sort of proved correct. However, Porsche really needed a car that would open up uncharted demographics. Now, the answer to Porsche's third car conundrum was very almost an MPV. Oh, can you imagine that? A Chrysler Voyager sort of shaped car with tombstone seats, big wheels, a massive V8 and Porsche crests front and back. Sounds horrid. Or maybe it could be okay. No, it sounds horrible. That was actually in development. The Germans were super excited about the idea of this. That was until Porsche US said, hang on a minute, fellas, you're missing the point. And the point the Americans were saying was, well, have you looked at these SUVs, these sport utility vehicles, the Mercedes ML, the BMW X5? These cars are taking America by storm. A ride through any of the affluent suburbs will see countless SUVs rolling around, taking the kids to tennis, doing whatever they do over there. I don't quite know, but crucially, a lot of American 911 owners also had these off-brand SUVs on the driveway for the family days. So the light bulb was well and truly lit. However, Porsche wouldn't be Porsche without giving an off-road car some real off-road capability. So that is what they had to do. Okay, so I'm seriously running out of angles here doing this on my own because Blair's too busy, but hopefully you're still watching. Probably not actually, but I'd like to keep talking anyway. June 1998 saw the launch of Project Colorado, or Project Colorado. I don't know how to do a Colorado accent. It was a joint merger between Porsche and Volkswagen. This is way before the days of the merger as well. And people would say, you know, why Volkswagen? I don't know if they did say that. I just let the words come out of my mouth. If people did say, why Volkswagen? The answer was simple. Porsche had the capability of making the car, creating a dynamic chassis and a great underpinning for the Cayenne and the Touareg. But Volkswagen had the capability, the production capability to send this car global and deal with mass production. So that's why Volkswagen, you bloody naysayers, even though there weren't any, but there could have been. So fast forward to 2002, and the Cayenne was launched. It's hideous, but more on that later. It was offered with two choices of engines, both V8s. Of course, even though the platform was shared between Porsche and Volkswagen, each individual manufacturer was responsible for its own engines and its own chassis setup. So, Porsche being Porsche, they didn't do a diesel car at the time, and nor would they. Can't blame them. They did later, but you know. This is the S, so the 4.5 V8, but there was also the twin-turbo turboness of the aptly named Turbo, which had blistering power, was actually faster to 100 than the Boxster S, believe it or not, and the car took the world by storm. Zuffenhausen kept the production of the Cayenne in Germany as well, just outside of Stuttgart in Leipzig, in a brand new production center built just for the Cayenne. So the peppery Porsche, Cayenne Pepper, had the performance to match the badge, but it also had great mile-munching capabilities as well, huge amounts of comfort, and bloody good off-road actually as well. I'm just going to check my notes so I can remember about the off-road bits. Back from my notes, which is nice. See if I remember it. So, freshly developed Porsche Traction Management, or PTM, worked underneath to actually control the power and send 62% of it to the rear axle, keeping just 38% at the front. See, Porsche being Porsche, they like a bit of oversteer, and if you really do push on in one of these, and you're a good driver, not like me, I'm sure you could probably hold quite a nice drift in this big old boat. But I won't fancy that, nor will I try it. As well as that, we had center locking differentials, PASM as well, Porsche active suspension management, as well as air suspension. So it was constantly monitoring the road and the driving style of the driver to make tiny little changes to make sure the handling was superb, it was always comfortable, and there was always power going to the right wheel. Any Porsche buffs who might still be watching this, feel free to pop a comment below on just how wrong I am, because that'll really help me grow. The Cayenne launched at the Paris Motor Show in 2002, and yeah, if I was Clarkson or somebody like that, I would say something like, and baguettes were choked upon, or croissant when flying through the sky. Who knows? All I do know is it made one hell of an impact. People went mad for this thing because, look at it, it's a bit gross. You know, it's got the 911-esque front end, large intakes. I would walk around, but the camera's fixed and I'd end up cutting myself out. So it looks a bit 911 on steroids from the front. Everything's a bit lifted. It gets worse round the back. And basically it's, I don't know, I really like that some people call Porsches porkers, because it kind of rhymes, and Porsche had the piggy livery at some point in its racing history. Why do I like Porker? Because it looks like a pig. It's pretty horrible. It was said at the time that it had bland styling, but it didn't matter, Porsche said. You wait till you drive one, then it'll all come clear. Footballers and Chelsea wives flocked to the Porsche dealerships to place their orders on these Cayennes, to the point that sales expectations were absolutely battered. Porsche expected to build 25,000 Cayennes per year. They ended up selling almost 35,000 a year. In the 8-year run of this first generation Cayenne, Porsche sold 286,000. But it didn't end there. The subsequent years have seen the Cayenne continue to dominate as well. The 1 millionth Cayenne rolled off the production line in 2020. That average is at about 55,000 units per year, which is actually double what Porsche sold across their whole model range back in 1991-92. Not a bad effort at all. You might call it ausgezeichnet? Yes, I think you might. Of course, joy and accolade can't just end with the numbers sold, but also the extra doors that it's opened, the new markets, the brand new demographics, the families who don't want a sports car like a 911 or a 924, 944, 928, whatever, of old. They do want a Porsche because of the prestige, the quality and the performance, but they need room for the kids. So that went into the Macan, the Panamera, the Taycan, the Cross Turismos, all these different iterations within. So the car that saved Porsche, I reckon it is, but great. It'll save Porsche, and it did, but what'll it do to your wallet if you buy one now? I reckon it'll murder it. But let's go for a drive. Ah, that's better. I really, really do prefer being inside this car as opposed to being outside it, simply because I can almost put to the back of my mind what the thing looks like to everybody else. Michael Mauer, head of design over at Porsche, said of the design journey of the Cayenne, it comes down to just 3 words: establish, sharpen, and refine. And man oh man, did they establish. Mostly positively, I think, but quite negatively. In a way, establish, yes. Wow and amaze, perhaps not. By the time this car was launched though in 2002, don't forget we'd already had the ML, we'd already had the X5 for 3 or 4 years. So the idea of a premium SUV, 4x4, posh looking, odd looking car was very much the norm. I always remember the first time I saw a Mercedes ML on Das Autobahn, I nearly died. When I first saw a BMW X5, my eyes nearly fell out, or should I say I nearly poked myself in them, because it looked like a 3 Series on stilts with big chunky wheel arches, and it looked weird, it looked pretty horrible. We were all used to 4x4s being Spartan, agricultural looking vehicles like Land Rover Defenders, of course, the old Discovery, which my dad had for a week and sold because it was horrid. Suddenly we've got these premium vehicles that are meant to look nice and be comfortable and fast, but they're sat so much higher. We were used to them by the time the Cayenne came around. Still didn't help the fact that it looked like an absolute pig, but inside the thing is absolutely glorious. You really feel with this that you're sat in the car, as opposed to many others where you feel you're sat on the car. So you're placed in the car wonderfully, and that really is, I'd say, part of Porsche's DNA running through it. The sports car vibe, even though you sat so much higher. Everything's just placed wonderfully. There's all sorts of specification. The PASM and the PTM bits are all down here in the middle, and it's all well and good, but I'm not playing with them because I'm absolutely petrified of doing so. The other day, Emily and I went to Manchester, which is about 40 miles away from here, and by the time we arrived, we lit up like a bloody Christmas tree on the dash. Guess what lights they were? The PASM and PTM lights. So I'm thinking, ouch, this is gonna suck for my wallet. And thankfully the lights went out again, but then they reappeared and then they went out. So there's obviously a gremlin somewhere behind, which I fully expected. The air suspension light came on as well. And then I noticed down here as well that it was trying to lower itself, even though I hadn't asked it to. And we were on a normal road, so there was absolutely no need for that to happen. Anywho, let's go for a drive, simply because I've been idling here for about 10 minutes. And I'm absolutely convinced that it's cost me about 50 quid already. See, I'm not averse to spending loads of money on fuel. I've had all sorts of cars that drink the stuff for fun. But this is something quite different. I had an E38 735 V8, and that sucked the juice. I had the D2 Audi S8 Ronin spec, and guess what? That sucked the juice as well. The Ferrari 355, that was really good on fuel, actually. This is not. It's just a big, fat, 4.5 litre V8, naturally aspirated, relatively old engine. So, essentially, just by having the car turned on, it drinks the stuff. Performance SUVs these days are clearly more efficient with more modern engines, finer engineering, greater materials, all that sort of jazz, plus maybe a turbocharger or two thrown in as well, just to keep things a little nicer when you're off boost. But this is just on, and it's going, ah! That was guzzling fuel, by the way, so don't clip that and use it for something else. Thank you. So yes, this is going to cost a fortune in fuel. I live quite literally 2.8 miles away from my unit. Double that for a commute, and what are we on there? 5.6 miles, plus nipping out for lunch. Call it 6 or 7 miles a day, plus all your bits. But whatever, I spent over 200 quid this week on fuel. It feels like I put 50 quid in. Granted, the fuel costs at the minute are ridiculous, naturally, but that's a conversation for a whole nother day. So at 169 now, I'd say we are, I'm putting 50 quid in, and you think that'll last a good long while. Well, it feels like the following day, my fuel light's coming back on again. So there's another 50 quid going in. Fuel consumption's a joke. I think this perfectly illustrates it. On your trip computer, you've got your buttons, so it'll tell me the range now. I've got 150 miles of wonderful V8 driving until I run out of fuel. I press to scroll through the menu, and I have my average speed. And that's it, we're back to the range again. So to find your average fuel consumption in this Cayenne, you've actually got to dig into the menu, go down to vehicle info, and then go down again to consumption, and it will tell me that my average here is 17.1 to the gallon. To be fair, I'm quite happy with that. I thought it would be a lot lower, but I find it so funny and so indicative actually that you have to dig for your average MPG on the trip computer. It's not just there, you've got to go and find it. In 2002, of course, when this car was new, you just paid 55, maybe 60 grand for one. You didn't really worry so much about fuel consumption, not least because it was about 75, 80p a litre at the time. But now, if you're buying this as a cheap modern classic, it's something to really be mindful of. I paid pretty top money for the car, I think. I paid 5.8 for this on account of the fact that it's got super low mileage at 75,000. Great service history. Lots and lots of OPC Porsche Centre stamps as well. Condition-wise, it's a beauty, particularly inside. All the leather is fine, not cracked. The seats haven't collapsed. Everything is sturdy like the Porsche you'd expect. Absolutely built to last. Exterior wise, there's a few bits. You know, there's lacquer peel on the bonnet. There's a little scuff on the front, and one of the headlight washer caps is missing. But apart from that, the wheels are great. The exhaust is okay. There's no rust anywhere. It's yeah, it's pretty all right. But you can call it a cheap car. Let's gun it from this roundabout. Oh, kickdown takes a while. Wow. All the way up to 6,000 revs. You shouldn't do that in a 4x4. This thing weighs 2.5 tons, for God's sake. And we just got to 50 miles an hour super quickly. Yeah, I quite like it. I don't know if I'm at that stage yet, though. Anytime I buy a classic or a modern classic car, there's always a little period where I'm not sure how far I can take it or how far I want to take it. See, with there being no lights on the dash right now, yeah, it's quite a pleasant place to be. I do worry that if I rag it around everywhere, I start trying to slap it around country lanes, particularly on these bloody tyres, things are going to go wrong, things are going to flash, things are going to break, and that's going to cost me an absolute fortune. So I'm not quite there yet, but it was nice. So how to wrap up this video of the car that saved Porsche? Well, the answer is yes. Yes, it did. And will it murder your wallet? Oh God, yeah. It's gonna torture it. It's gonna murder it. It's gonna defile the body. Oh God, that's a bit, am I going a bit strong there? We're nearly at Halloween, so we can talk like that a little bit. But yeah, your wallet is going to be mutilated. Not least on fuel and serviceable items, but with these cars, they've all got big wheels. And big tyres, good big tyres, cost a load of money. Granted, they should last. I'm hoping that these Continentals will last a good 10,000 miles at the very least. But let's see. There are no lights on the dash currently, which makes me happy. The tracking is all over the place, so I'll have that done when the tyres are being fitted. So we can call that £860, £1,000. If and when things do go wrong with the suspension, you're into multi-thousand pounds worth of bills. Sensors, everything, anything on this car that can go wrong will cost an absolute fortune. I'll tell you one thing it did do actually the other day. It made a noise at a roundabout that I never want to hear again in my life. I don't have a clue what it was. It sounded a bit diffy, to be honest. I was pulling onto a roundabout and it just sort of went and there was no power whatsoever. And then it just went again. And I'm quite sure that if that happens again, I'm gonna have to sell literally everything I own. That's the fact. But for now, while we're just cruising along and everything's nice and lovely, I think it's epic. I do. I absolutely love it, actually. Maybe I'm talking myself into it. More than I'm talking about the car is making me think, actually, this is a really pleasant place to be. It's quiet, it's comfortable, it's fast. There's a V8 under the bonnet. Yes, it's gonna cost £1 million to replace a sensor or the PASM system. You'll be remortgaging your house just to keep the car on the road. But it's kind of okay. My plan for the car is to keep it, of course, but it's going to be a camera car for the studio. So I've got the mounts and the gimbal attachments and the camera arms and all that sort of jazz. I just needed a great car to fit all of that too. I was looking at another V8, a B7 RS4. There was a perfect example on collecting cars, Misano red, low mileage, great history, and it ended up going for a relatively decent price. I had a budget in mind. I could have bought it, but I got a call on the final day of the auction about something else that we're doing soon, and that's going to cost loads of money. So I had to be a bit more sensible, shelve the RS4 and look for something else. And that's when I thought about the Cayenne. Straight onto eBay, saw this, went around the following day, got it bought, got it back, and yeah, it's only now, 10 days later or so, that I'm really starting to settle into the car and enjoy it. Yes, it's going to cost me a fortune to run. However, I'm going to spend money in certain places that might alleviate some of that risk. The suspension might be getting changed. The wheels and tyres may be getting changed again. And things like little scuffs and chips and lack appeal, I don't mind, because the thing's getting bloody wrapped. So it's going to look great. I'm going to update you guys in about a month, I think. By that point, I'll have done another 1,000 or so miles. So it'll be interesting to see if I'm destitute by that point, which I might well be. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching. I'd love you to subscribe if you haven't already, because it makes me feel nice. So all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I truly adore and cherish all of you so very much. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd really love you to. We're on with all sorts, as well as the Cayenne and the camera car and the Ferrari Challenge and various other bits that are happening. So it's only going to get more and more exciting. I'll see you next time. Much love.